of how they are constrained by environment. Pollution is a big issue that we have to watch out on as well, that comes into play here. But we know that the hub is the city. So we're focusing on the challenges of waste management, public safety, maintaining economic growth. All these issues are things that we focus on. Because the difference is, if we can get this velocity of money going faster, everybody, including those who we want to be financially included, who are now not included in the Ethiopian economy, will become included. Think about if a rural farmer can get credit for their seeds and their fertilizer, gets credit for when their crops are sold without having to leave their farm. All these types of issues matter. And it's not just the great things that are done with remittances coming into the country, but it's really understanding that Ethiopia belongs to a global world now, and how can you best take advantage of that technology. That gets more people included faster is that people can get to work, and we know that's critical. Inclusion. One of the things we work with, for example, is the World Food Program, and everybody who is now a refugee, for example, is getting a MasterCard, and they are getting payments to pay for food on this card. This allows the merchants to be happier and have the ability to absolutely get there. But the most important thing is it's also increased the donations to the World Food Program as well, because people have accountability of where money is. We know that transparency is key in government, and the more we can increase transparency through digital, this helps. And one of the other things, which is my job at MasterCard, is to take data to drive strategy. And one of the things that happens when you are financially included in a digital economy is we have the data to understand what's going on. And we want this to drive financial inclusion and inclusive growth. One of the things we did is we took over the London transport. I want you to understand economically what this means. London is saving £100 million the first year because of this. Why? Because did you know that an overloaded bus or a train needs double the maintenance than one that's not overloaded? So think about if we know where people are moving around here in Addis Ababa, so we know where to put the trains on and when, so they're not overloaded, so they don't need to be as costly to maintain. That's just one of the things that comes out of being smart. And again, one of the things that's also important is to measure an initiative to see if it's successful. And again, this is where the data comes in. And the final thing, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues, we focus heavily on tourism. Because why? Tourism drives foreign direct investment. If you want to continue to reach out to get the investment into Ethiopia to continue to broaden the economy, while it's great all the initiatives being done within the economy, the more people come and visit and like a place and come back, the more likely they are to come and do business there. And so one of the things is you can use the data to drive people to come. And now, because one of the things that interestingly happened, and then I'll turn it over, is that post-2008, around the world, we decided instead of continuing to acquire more stuff, more goods, all right, we were going to spend more time with our family and friends. We call it the experiential economy. So instead of working ourselves to death to buy a bigger house, we're now working to travel. So you are in competition with every other major great country in the world to visit now for this person who is traveling all the time. But it's a great way to stimulate an economy. Sorry, water falling.
Okay. Oh, you can't see it very well, I guess. Maybe I will explain it just using my laptop. You just have to excuse me because I was just called here, on a kind of situation where my colleague, my friend, Dr. Rabiot, he just had to leave, because of emergency situation. So I was asked, to fill and give you some insight, about the e-government here in Ethiopia. The way the government see e-government is just, it can leverage, there is a way that, ICT can be leveraged to the government through effective governance, improved services, and also it can help, the socio-economic growth. So there are 4 elements to our e-government strategy. That is, government has to be closer to people. That's what the government believes. There is also, effective governance. ICT has to be well governed, and improved service delivery, and socioeconomic growth. As a matter of fact, we are really at early stage of development. Earlier, we were able to develop, about some 219 government services, and there are mobile applications that can be rendered, to the people. And we strongly believe that e-government has to really reach the aspect of our lives and everything. So basically, these 4 elements are really being worked out, and we are still in the process of developing applications. Very soon, hopefully, we will have our larger data center, which will probably provide, a lot of the e-government services. Now that e-government is not only the focus of, the government, other people, like, for example, we have an incubation center where we focus to provide, citizen-centric applications which can be provided, to the citizens that will curb, social problems and things of that kind. So there are involvement of other aspects. And at least for now, if you can hold, maybe when we meet, next year, we will see some improvement in the e-government area. And hopefully, we will be able to deliver, a lot better, being more organized and so on. So you just have to bear with me for that, and I thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Clément Wageneza. I run a new government platform in Rwanda that has to date processed more than 3.8 million administrative papers digitally for the government of Rwanda. We've launched the platform in July 2015 under the brand name Irembo. When we launched, we had put 5 government services accessible for citizens to apply for. Initially, it was possible for citizens to apply online through the website irembo.gov.rw, and we launched with services around birth certificates, marriage certificates, the type of service that citizens want to access. So today we are at 90 services, around 90 government services that are available on the platform. It ranges from civil status, national ID application, to things like land transfer, driving license. The most recent service that we've put online allows Rwandans to renew their health, their universal health coverage through our platform. We've expanded the accessibility of the platform to go beyond online, so to not only make it available on mobile phone using USSD technology for those who do not have access to a device that can connect to internet, but also we expanded the access to our service through a network of agents that became very clear at an early stage that was going to be important for the non-digitally literate and to accessing all the countries. So we have a network of about 2,500 agents. So yeah, globally that's it. We do this under a public-private partnership with the government of Rwanda that we signed in the end of 2014. So to operate, to create, build, operate this platform and this service over a period of 25 years. I mean, what I wanted to highlight there is, in our opinion, public-private partnership to drive e-government is extremely important for two main reasons. One is the requirement to innovate and the drive to constantly adjust to the market needs. So we believe at Rwanda Online that the service or the government service, when digitized in this kind of public-private partnership, then it's driven by not only the commercial, but the need to get the citizen to adopt and understand how useful it is for them. So for the product to be relevant, it requires constant innovation, constant investment, constant improvement. So we've completed what we call our first phase, which was to put as many government services online as possible. The idea being to be relevant as a platform, but then secondly, and it's the process we have now started, is to transform government service. Transforming government service means removing the need to request a paper. For example, when a student is going to register to a school, they would require them to have a birth certificate. But if we digitize the application to a school, then it should imply or automatically apply for the birth certificate for the students that's going to register. So it's really that phase of transforming government service. What we've done is changing 5 of the main services that are applied for, mostly birth certificates, marriage certificates. So for people to no longer at all have to go to a government office to collect a paper. The paper is issued electronically at the end of the process, and this paper is acceptable by any agency that requires it and is verifiable through a specific code on the paper. Since we launched it, I think it was 3 months ago, 40% of all birth certificates are applied in that manner, electronic certificate, and we think we will be very close to 100% in the next 2 to 3 months. To conclude the introduction on what we are building, we have, so today we are at about 20,000 government paper processed on our platform on a daily basis. We estimate that this constitutes 75 to 80% of interaction between the citizen and the government when citizens are applying for administrative papers. What we ambition is to really no longer accelerate this, but rather focus on the transformation. And unfortunately, what this means is to reduce the number of transactions citizens need to go through to complete a certain specific service. And again, this goes to transforming government service. I say unfortunately, because it disrupts our business model. Our business model is the more people use our platform, the more revenue we get. But then we believe that there will be other business models around what we are building if we constantly look at disrupting ourselves. Secondly is we are opening up the platform, so not to be alone to innovate when it comes to government services. So what we foresee as our initial stage to this is the way people interact with our platform. So today it's through mobile and web, and you would see all the list of services. But we think that there are innovations that can happen in specific sectors. Let's say driving license. An innovator can come and create an application people can use to do tests and things like that. And at the end, they complete a transaction to apply, so to pass a driving license test. And we pay per transaction to those who innovate around those kind of use cases that are more specific, that are more targeting some specific users. So yeah, if I was to introduce, that's what we work on.
Hello everyone. It's nice to be here. My name is John O'Connor. I'm the Director of African Operations for a company called Input Output Hong Kong. Input Output Hong Kong is a technology company that you've probably never heard of, but we're one of the largest in the blockchain engineering space. Our company's goal is to build blockchains for private companies, for governments, for NGOs, for private actors, really anyone who we feel can add value to their business or to solve a problem which they face through a blockchain. My role here in Ethiopia is to set up a base of operations for all of the work that we do across Africa. Our expectation is that we'll have up to 200 developers here in Addis Ababa, working as junior software developers for Input-Output, hired by the company, but still working here in Addis. The goal of building all of this development capacity is to then use this capacity to solve real-world problems that are affecting countries across sub-Saharan Africa. Within Ethiopia, a number of the problems which my esteemed colleague over here was just discussing over licensing, registration, interaction with government, all of these areas are places where blockchain can really make an impact. Ultimately, blockchain is really about distributing the power of making entries in a ledger. So previously, you'd have a trusted third party, like a bank, or maybe a government, who would be responsible for keeping all of the records. With a blockchain-based solution, you can distribute this across many participants. This has obvious applications for any area which involves record keeping. So two examples, which I think we'll be talking about a little later, will be health records and land registry systems, both of which I think are very relevant for Ethiopia. So in summary, we're a technology company, we build blockchains, and we're here to train and hire staff for our company, as well as look for interesting areas where we can apply our technology in Ethiopia. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, panel. So I have a question for each of you. These are not exclusively, so after the person has answered the rest of the panel, please Peter jump in, otherwise we'll move on. Sarah, if I can start with you. What does it mean for a government to be smart, and why is it important?
Well, one of the biggest challenges government has is it's got so many responsibilities, and how do you manage these, right? And in a world where technology keeps evolving very quickly, but we know many government records are still on paper, even microfiche, whatever you want to put them on. And the reality is the challenge becomes, because as I was saying, we are in a global world now, due to the internet, and due to the fact that people have access to information, which gives them the choice, for example, to buy elsewhere rather than buy in your own country. Do things like that. So the necessity for governments to adapt digital technology and bring themselves up into this space is so critical, because again, the business will move elsewhere, and that is the real challenge. If you think about it, we are trying always to attract more business. We're trying to attract economic growth. That is not something we do in a vacuum by ourselves. If we're growing crops, we want to export them somewhere. If we are building technology, we're wanting to sell it to the world. So this information, you can't then run your economy as if it's not connected elsewhere. And doing this digitally saves you money. It's just as simple as that. And this is the key thing. And government, unfortunately, worldwide, has been the last to adopt this technology and move in this direction, and that's why it is so critical. And there's many solutions. There's not one right way, but the only wrong way is not to, because the final thing I will mention is moving a government to being smart means you're moving away from using cash all the time. And cash actually costs an economy about 1.5% of GDP growth. Think about that. If you could add that and compound that each year and get that extra gain into the government growth, this takes away the problems that we have, right? It makes your growth sustainable. So this is the important thing. If you're digital, there's not the need for cash, and you can really see things moving forward. Anybody else?
I'll give an example of something I was following on this morning on one of the WhatsApp group I communicate with other government officials, specifically on this service I mentioned we just launched, which is the universal health coverage. It's a mandatory service. Every Rwandan, every one of the 12 million Rwandans needs to be registered on this. Now, before it was a whole manual process, it would take 3 months and you wouldn't know really how it's going. It involved a lot of cash. Today, people are renewing their health insurance, paying with mobile money. But the more important thing, as per the discussion we're going on, is the ability for the owner of the service to have real-time insights on how people are registering to this service across the country. And this led to a decision on this WhatsApp group that they should deploy some people in some districts that are lagging behind, where numbers are showing that they are less than 40% of the inhabitants not yet paying or renewing their health insurance coverage. So imagine if you have real-time view on this and how it's going, and you can make instant decision like that on where you are going to put effort. So that's really what, to me, is the biggest outcome of digitizing these services and putting them online.
Yeah, I'll add something very briefly to that, which is, I think, I've been going to conferences for about 5 years where people have been talking about the value of data-driven decision-making. I think one of the difficulties which a country like Ethiopia has is, even if there is the desire to make data-driven decisions, how do you convert that desire into an ability to do that if everything is it's on paper, right? So how do you accumulate the data? How do you present it in a way in which you can get meaningful insights? I don't think these questions are simple, but I do believe that some of the work which you've been doing, right, revolves around, at a very basic level, how do we use either people or optical character recognition to take this record and to turn it into a piece of digital data upon which I have a 95% confidence level that it is the same thing as is on the paper. So I think that there's lots of problems which are boring problems to solve, but the value of doing them is absolutely huge and crucial for any of the economies we're discussing today.
And I would just add one point. A lot of people get very much overwhelmed by the amount of data or the amount of information. And I always remind people to do what I call the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. And what I mean by that is that you literally sit there and say, what are the 4 or 5 critical things we need to know? Let's solve and pull that information first, rather than trying to pull everything and build dashboards that no one reads and no one looks at. We've had big data has been talked about forever, but again, it's not big data, it's smart data. What is actually going to make the government more efficient? What's going to make it work better? Simple as that.
Okay, I have also some points to make, especially in the case of Ethiopia. We have several challenges. One being technology adoption. The other one being, illiteracy, and of course, we have also poor infrastructure that we are in the process of developing. Having said that, mobile phone came to Ethiopia about 16, 17 years ago, and most African countries they have reached, a level of almost 100%, coverage. I mean, 100%. Utilization, and almost every person has a mobile phone. In our case, we are reaching almost 60%, and that's a good achievement, but there is illiteracy problem, that we have about 50%. Then that has been really a challenge. Now, if we are talking about e-government, how are we going to expand, government services to the rural area? And that has been quite a challenge. What the government has done is, okay, we call it, the lowest level of administration is called Kabale. We have to bring it, down to the Kabale level. So Ethiopian Telecom has been given a mandate to open up, kiosks where, first of all, it can create, a kind of job for people who can sit there and fill the forms, the government services that are already, some of them which are already in place. And we have, those kind of activities. What I would like to ask my friend here from, you're from Rwanda. I know, their ICT development index has improved because of, their online services. Now, how did you resolve, the illiteracy issue? That how is the common person who doesn't know how to read and write benefits, from that kind of, let's say, services? The second one is, I'm not sure, your infrastructure, if it has reached, the lowest level of administration and so on. If you can explain that to our audience.
So when we started, as I mentioned, we very quickly realized that our service wasn't going to reach every Rwandan equally. So that's why we created a program to have a network of agents. So what our agent is someone who is literate, was able to afford a tablet or a laptop, already had some location they were working from. So they just require to have a tablet or a laptop and a small scanner. And what we did was to incentivize them by paying a transaction fee for each citizen they assist. So very quickly this program grew from initial maybe 50 agents, 35 agents when we started the program. It did actually us putting agents, we first put agents on the smallest administrative offices. And by doing that, it accelerated adoption of the platform, so the program grew much faster, and we are now at 2,200 agents, so we have basically more access points than the government would have. On the second question on connectivity, actually us putting this service online and deploying this network of agents drove the need for connectivity to be available at all points. So there are places where connectivity was an issue for our agents. But fortunately, because they would let us know, then we would escalate this to telecom operators. Sometimes telecom operators don't get connectivity to reach that because nobody is complaining about not having enough connectivity. So really the need to use technology to apply for government service, in our opinion, has driven the need to track and make sure connectivity is available at most of the places. And lastly is on government offices. So we created something where we started to rank districts and government offices on how they provide services. So those that were ranked last and had a reason being that they do not have computers in their office and connectivity, they had to explain why, and government now started to put more effort to get these offices connected. So I think these three things combined have not only gotten us to be closer to the citizen, and then lastly, accelerated deployment of all infrastructure that's required for all this service to be provided to the citizen.
Thank you. Okay, so Dr. Figre, you said a little bit about the challenges. John had briefly touched on some of the exciting opportunities for Ethiopia. What do you think are the most exciting things Ethiopia could take advantage of in terms of digitalization, becoming a smart government, providing better services to the people?
Most of all, I would say, the commitment of the government is tremendous. The government is really committed. It has made, the development of ICT one of its main priorities. So we can base, on that. And now that we are actually in the process of developing, a lot of e-government applications. Mainly, we have two kinds of transactional, kind of services, and the other one is more of, informational type of services. I think we have almost there, to cover the informational type of services. And despite, its challenges, and of course the one that I explained about our illiteracy problems and so on, but at the household level, people, the information will reach somehow, to the vast majority of the people. But the transaction, it is quite a challenge, for the government, and digitization is one area that the government has focused and working on it, the most important thing is the government's commitment. And it's not going to be done, overnight, but over the years, we are determined, to improve our ICT development index, which will show, the progress that we'll be making in the future.
I think one of the other things that I would add that I think is so important is public-private partnerships. They get talked a lot about, and people use it as a buzzword, but I cannot tell you how critical this is. A government cannot do this alone. A business cannot do this alone without the government's commitment. And I think really figuring out how together you can reach that sort of last mile of connectivity, of working on the illiteracy issue, all those types of things are things that can be solved if you've got the two working together. Because if you think about it from the perspective like we were talking about in Rwanda, it's obviously in the healthcare provider's interest if they can know that everybody's connected and has the service, right? So that it's in their interest to try to make certain that everybody is reached who's covered by this. So the more you can have these sort of joint partnerships to work together, I think it's important. But again, I would also emphasize, regardless of elections, if a government remains committed, because it is a longer term problem than just an election cycle, right?
Yeah, she mentioned, public-private partnership. I think we have an outstanding, work done, on PPP. Especially, we have Lahulu. It's, a payment system where one can go, to a very close location and pay, all his bills, including whether it is electricity, phone, water, and even, something like, if you violate the traffic, then you can pay, your tickets there. And that's a big achievement, and that could be a lesson, for Africa, basically. And that has been now extended not only for the city of Addis Ababa, but it has been extended, to other cities as well. So this is basically done using PPP. The government provides, the housing and the other one. The private sector, all the, equipment, manpower, and the logistics and everything. And we have a model, actually. And we are very proud about that.
So that's a nice segue to asking, from the Rwandan example, what are the lessons you learned about how government and the private sector can work together? Rwanda put together a PPP, as has been talked about, quite a long-term one as well. Could you say a little bit about what the learnings were and what other governments could learn from the Rwandan experience?
To be honest, at the very beginning, it wasn't very easy. It wasn't an easy journey to get this PPP implemented. So the biggest challenge we faced when we started was governance, where basically you expect, yes, you are into a public-private partnership, but you have some kind of a governance structure where decision directions are being taken as we go. So let's say when we started, our mandate was only to put online government services. But the more we started doing this, we found out we had to have a network of agents. Of course, this was going to be a cost on us. We found out that we had to put this service online. This was going to be a cost on us. Now, we faced this challenge of governance, but then we went ahead and created this so for the platform to become relevant, then come back to government and tell them, look, we had to make these choices. And we had to go this direction because it made sense. So the most difficult, I'd say, in a PPP, when it comes to digitizing, it's not like building a road. It's straightforward. You know how long the road is and how wide the road will be. Here we are talking about constant innovation. You change directions all the time. So if there are PPP, the governance and the authority that this governance team is given is extremely important. As we moved and we started to show services coming online, this structure slowly came on board and we started to even move faster. But initially, that was the problem. And when the governance doesn't work, then you have to deal with each institution you are digitizing service for individually, and it makes it very, very difficult. So really, that lesson learned. But on the other hand, the private sector needs to know also that they are the innovators within this marriage. So finding quick wins very quickly, minimum viable products, so to showcase that it's possible. And that's what's good in, again, digitizing. It's not easy to do a minimum viable road, but doing a minimum viable digital product is possible. So coming up with those innovations, show some things, some results very quickly, then this drives even the politics to follow now and support the whole thing.
Yeah, I'd like to add that whilst I truly believe that it's important and a valuable exercise to think about what the lessons are that can be learned from Rwanda, it is obviously important to reiterate what different countries we are talking about here. Ethiopia is a country of 106 million people. When you talk about deploying things to rural areas, you are thinking about a very different scale of problem to trying to deploy this within Rwanda. And for some of the projects which I'm looking at in the agricultural space here, I think that I'd be absolutely mad not to get really deep into the experience of the ATA over their work and working in rural areas and trying to deploy new solutions across Ethiopia. Similarly, I think for some things which would seem very, very simple wins or very easy conversations to have with government in some countries, these conversations are anathema in others. And it's for no other reason that these countries are different and have grown up and had their own path dependencies. So I think it's really important to be sympathetic to the country which you're involved in and try to build solutions that people are actually looking for and wanting.
I wanted to get back to the innovation idea. We realized how critical that was. And if you think about it, my company started 50 years ago by the banks just as a payment system, and it was a card. We actually had a big C in the name. Now we've actually changed the logo to little c because we know most people will use mobile and never use an actual physical card. But what we finally have evolved to is around the world, and here in Nairobi, we have MasterCard labs. And what we do is we invite someone to come in, and over 3 days, we sit down and we say, we're gonna solve this problem together. And we bring our best scientists and the people solving the problem, and we come out with a working solution in 3 days that we go then pilot together. And because this shouldn't take forever. This is not sitting here and trying to find the perfect solution. It's saying, let's go into a lab, work on a problem, we know we have it, okay, let's bring the best minds, we've tried this over here, that's not gonna work here, here's the challenge here, how do we do this? But this is the point of sitting here and saying, let's iterate, let's keep trying until we break it, but let's do it fast, all right? Because there isn't the time to waste. This is an economic issue, and there's not money to waste on it either. So if you think about accelerating The person to find, if you want to do this, go find this gentleman right here. He's in charge of it. But the suffice to say is we have this around the world, and we do this on a consistent basis because we know little problems actually can be applied in many, many different places.
Thank you. Okay, John. You're working in blockchain, which I'm sure many in the audience find a little bit overwhelming. There are many what look to be breakthrough technologies coming down the line. Blockchain, there's Internet of Things, question around big data, AI. What should governments bear in mind when they're thinking about these technologies, how to implement them, how to think about them, particularly given they may not have the capability, they may not have the sophistication that the specialists in the private sector have around these technologies?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think this is the actual key question. When it comes to any new technology which you're hoping to implement across a country or on the government level, education has got to be a key portion of it. It's all too easy to sit down in a meeting and to talk jargon about your technology or the value that you think you can bring, and the person on the other side of the room very well may be nodding along because you've thrown a bunch of big words down there and no one likes to feel like they don't understand what's going on. So I think literally the first step is to be really honest and start having a conversation with the relevant departments and say, explain simply your value proposition. What can you do for them? I think the reciprocal, though, of what you can expect or ask from government is some clarity and transparency over the decision-making process and over the implementation timelines that any successful project would have. I think it also requires you to be able to have really honest conversations about some problems which no one really may want to talk about. And, you know, a classic example, I think, is land registries. If you could put Ethiopian's land registry system onto a blockchain-based system, you would have a system which was much less open to fraud, waste, and abuse. There would be efficiencies there, and it would also lead to greater economic growth. So whilst I think that that argument is actually quite a simple argument to make, you have to talk about the hard stage, which is how do we move from an analog system filled with pieces of paper to one which is digital? And that's a very hard process. It requires the digitization of records, but it also requires a court process for all of the cases where people don't agree about the title to the land. These problems have to be solved all at once, or at least within a period. So this is a very complicated problem and can only be solved with the support of government. So yeah, I suppose to summarize, I think that these type of projects really are relationships, and it requires both trust, dialogue, and cooperation on both sides if you were to expect a successful outcome.
Well, I would just say when there's money involved, there's always challenges, as we all know. Everyone can smile on that one, right? And again, I think it is the issue of sitting here, and this is why we always believe everybody has to be in the room. Government, you know, the stakeholders, everybody has to be in the room, and you definitely do have to agree and make it very transparent that as of this date, we have agreed. Because blockchain works because there's a starting point, right? But if you never have that starting point, you never can have the ledger. And I think, you know, the issue that I think is most critical here is, you know, we know land is an asset. We know it's valuable. But I will tell you what's even more valuable is services. Let me be very clear. People pay a lot more worldwide, in the worldwide economy, for services than they do for land. So the question is, what can be created of service out of the land? And that's the way to think about it. So yes, we need to do it. We know it's extremely valuable, but how do we continue to evolve the economy overall, again, so everybody is financially included and participating?
There is something that we would like to learn, you know, from the payment systems, basically. I understand, you know, e-government also needs some sort of, you know, back-end payment system. In our case, our you know, national bank has, you know, very stringent you know, regulations, and what I would like to learn is how is it eased up, you know, in other countries? Maybe if you can share, you know, your experience, how their national bank, allow them, to do things or to ease up, our payment systems.
Well, in my experience, and we're in 210 countries, so I get a lot of experience, the key thing that happens is transparency, right? And so if there's transparency put into the system, people are comfortable with money moving out of the country because then they know it can come back in. And there's an understanding of that, right? And so the key thing that you look at where there's been more and more restriction of payments is where you see more and more abuse of that restriction, unfortunately, rather than that free flow of payments going back and forth each way. Now, the key thing, and I'll use the country where I'm from, the United States. Now, we have a saying in the United States that there's nothing more important than understanding that there's only two truths in America. One is death, and the second is taxes, and taxes follow you in death, okay? So, in other words, you're a U.S. citizen around the world. Wherever you work, wherever you do, we pay taxes in the U.S. We're the only country in the world that does this, just so you know, okay? So, the key thing about this, though, is we also allow free movement of money all around the world. So, but they also, since they know where it is, and the issue for us is we get jailed. So it's a very expensive fine and jail, right? So there's a key thing to appreciate for us. It's not necessarily the incentive I would choose, but the point is there's a sense that we report that money everywhere, and that is the key thing. The other thing is that the central banks around the world have done a better job of working together and communicating. So as you recall, there was a challenge made to the Swiss central banking system with respect to privacy years ago, and privacy was broken. Now, the key thing that happened is it wasn't that every other country in the world tightened their privacy law and money moved there. It's that they decided to share when there was illegal money going on. And that's why the amount of anti-money laundering laws have increased, but the amount of money laundering has dropped worldwide. And that's a good thing for the world economy, all right? Again, it's transparency. I am a capitalist. I want everyone to be able to do all the business they want to do. But there's a sense of understanding the responsibility of where everything's going. So the key is the transparency and the sense of we're doing this, and yes, you can move your money out, but we want to just know how it's going to come back into the country. And all right, so that there's a two-way system of it going in and out. And that's been the most effective way. The other thing is make it digital, so you really know where it's going. Right? And that's, again, the issue. So one of the big things that we have done is introduce fast ACH. So moving so it's literally real-time payments when governments are making payments. And we do 90% of the payments, for example, in the United Kingdom. And literally it's in real time, but there's a full ledger of exactly how it's moving, so the government exactly knows what's going on. So those are two ways that you can think about it.
Okay. So I think I'd like to start calling on the audience for questions now. Just as a reminder what a question is, it's a short set of words that ends in a question mark. So I'd really encourage you to follow that, if you would. Hands up, and I will call on people as you have questions. And somebody bring the microphone. We have one.
I'll be caddy.
Thank you very much. My name is Aklila, and I came from a government corporation, the Ethiopian Railways Corporation. And I have a few questions, both for the government delegate and everyone on the table. My first question is, we always talk about a smart government and automation and everything, but I think the central point of having a smart government is a national data center. And we've never had that. Since we've never had that, we couldn't be able to integrate so many governmental agencies and universities and healthcare centers. So we couldn't be able to record, inspect, follow, trace information between employees and citizens. So when are we really going to have that national data center? Because the second thing will be online payment. If we cannot have online payment service, we shouldn't really talk about anything regarding internet or anything, because the only advantage we can take from internet is social media network, and that is not going to take us anywhere regarding productivity or something else. The other questions I'm going to ask is for the rest of the table. Most of you are service providers, except for the Rwandan delegate. If you want something to be built, you should help support building the platform itself first. For example, the woman who came from MasterCard, I'm sure you're planning to provide payment service in this country. But if we cannot have a better infrastructure, we cannot have a payment or anything else, to be honest. So how are you planning on help supporting building this infrastructure and everything? My another question is, I've been trying to visit everyone at the expo. 95% of those booths provide service or application or hardware from outside of the country. Now, if we cannot have a possible way of nurturing innovation in this country, we will be dependent on foreign currency. Now, you have shown on your presentation that Ethiopia is one of the fastest growing economies, but all those GDPs means nothing if we cannot take over on how we can build our own system, our own MasterCard if we have to, or PayPal, or anything. So how are you helping transforming knowledge whenever you are providing service or whenever you are building a system or for a government organization or for a private one for itself? How are you trying to transfer knowledge on how our people can be able to build their own infrastructure and their own system? Last, I'm sorry. This is my last one, I'm sorry. I'm gonna be done. My last one is goes to the Rwandan delegate, that you guys have done to manage an incredible job. I didn't know you have deployed 19 government services. What suggestions would you provide for the Ethiopian government when it comes to taking those bold measures on transforming from a manual procedure to the automation one? Thank you very much. Sorry for taking too much.
Let me try to answer, your first question about the national data center. Actually, we do have a national data center. That's where all government services are hosted. And also it provides something like a backup service, for bigger ministries and so on. So, but on a continuous basis, there is a big study, done to consolidate, all government data services. It's called Government Integrated Data Center. That has been studied. The data center has been designed, and it has taken, a plot in the IT park, and our national data center will be built, very, very soon. So all the funds have been allocated and so on. So hopefully that is what we are also, waiting, to see that really function. But, as we say, we have really a data center, a national data center, maybe in a small scale, but you know, on a bigger stage, we will have our data center very soon.
Okay. Suggestion. I think I already said it, but one of the first suggestion is public-private partnership. Because again, I believe in the private sector, most of the programs. Okay. So one, if I compare the program we've run compared to other programs that governments did run by themselves, most of the time government invests a lot of money very quickly so to get something created, yet you can start really small, and I think that's where public-private partnerships start. So to really start small and then get feedback from how people are interacting with the service, scale it as fast as possible. So I think one is really public-private partnership, and second is starting small, getting feedback very quickly, and then scaling it instead of doing the usual governments do, spending a lot of money so to build an e-government, but in the end, you have a white elephant that's there that's not used.
So, hello? All right, so what we've done in terms of innovation is we've got something called Start Path going. Now, Start Path is an accelerator. So someone who has started a company can come and apply to be a Start Path company. And now we do two things with that. One, we put our own money into these companies. So yes, you're looking for our money, we have money. Secondly, the thing that we do is we actually come in and train you. So we bring you in to the accelerator, and you can work with our scientists to actually accelerate your business. The final and third thing we have done is we have set up a Center for Financial Inclusion. That is on the for-profit side of MasterCard. That is not MasterCard Foundation, all right? And we put $500 million in it at the beginning of this year, in addition to all the money that was already there. We put an additional $500 million in, and that is working on projects around the world, making certain that we marry data with governments, for example, in terms of providing them the data, the services, the backup, to help them accelerate the financial inclusion. And then the final thing I will mention is the MasterCard Foundation, which many of you may not know. We took, when we went public, 10% of our company and put it in a foundation, all right? It is now as big as the Gates Foundation, just so you know. Our stock has been worth so much. And it does all its work in Africa, just so you know.
Yeah, I'd just add one thing on our side. Of the 200 staff which we hope to have here, building codes for our company, for our products, and also training people to build their own businesses on the blockchain. Out of the 200 staff which we expect to have here, all of them, except for me, will be Ethiopian, and I'm half Ethiopian anyway, so I'm not sure whether I count. So when it comes to training, skin in the game, making sure that Ethiopia gets the benefit of the skills and of the money which we're investing for our operations here, it's all Ethiopian.
We get asked this question all the time with respect to payments, and people saying they want to set up their own payment system rather than use ours. The suggestion we have, and it sounds selfish, but take it for what it's worth, we employ people in every single country in the world that we're in, and we employ more and more of them faster. Setting up your own payment system is almost impossible. We literally, think about this, you get 4 people to simultaneously agree that a transaction is good in less than a nanosecond. That's what a payment system is. And it requires incredible trust and, frankly, a heck of a lot of money to establish it. And so what we say is ride our rails or our competitors' rails, which is what, for example, Kafia does, all right? So they've got a system, we're partnering with them here in Ethiopia. They're riding our gateway rails, right? But it's their business. The money is, and they're employing people here, and that's an Ethiopian business, right? But again, it's not recreating. And I think this is the point of technology. It's not to recreate systems that already exist or things like that. It's to say, what do we do better? What can we add? And that's where we can charge a premium for what we do best.
Yeah, I think the other question around the local content, if you like. So you mentioned all the foreign software and hardware out in the expo. If, as an economy, you are doing better by taking that technology, if you're more efficient, if you are able to export more, it's a net benefit. And so it makes sense to grasp what is out there in terms of technology, where it's going to be useful for you, for your local context. At the same time, it's also possible to develop your local industry, your local knowledge. We've had 2 very good sessions about developing the skills of the Ethiopian workforce and how to boost entrepreneurship in Ethiopia around digital. And I think that is also going to be an important part of this. But let's not say just because it's from outside, it's a difficult thing to use. If it's going to make us more efficient in Ethiopia, hence more profitable, hence able to export better, to compete better on the world stage, then that's still a benefit for us. Okay. More questions? We have one there, one there. It's all been men so far. Oh, there's a woman over there as well. We'll take one.
Hello, so my name is Faith Chisulo. Until recently, I was managing, one of the financial technology platforms which we provide to financial institutions that run the Ember service. So I've had the privilege of working in Rwanda, and I think I was there when the Rwanda Online was being set up. And also I've had the privilege of, coming into Ethiopia where mobile money is just starting out. So my question really, because I believe in you cannot just copy and paste, but there are certain, principles and values, that you can apply to a certain problem. My question is to Clement. I remember, I think from the beginning, there were issues of, getting all the players in the ecosystem, to partner with you. And what I would want to hear from you is, starting from inception, what do you think are the critical success factors, when you're starting up an e-government platform? And I believe now that you're moving on to a growth stage, what do you think are now the critical success factors for moving that up? And then let's talk about now maybe the governance as well as the regulatory environment. From my own experience, I don't think technology is an issue. There is technology here in Ethiopia. But probably what could be the problem is how do you harness that technology to actually help in the last mile delivery, where you take it to enable people use it efficiently. So probably I think any of the panelists can answer to this. I mean, how do we, bring about the technology to actually do what it's intended to do? What is it that we can do? Because I know there are fears. There could be fears, from a regulatory point of view. There could be fears from a governance point of view. But how do we, arrest these fears and actually deliver what the masses, what can actually help, people to improve their lives? So that's my question.
Great, thank you. We'll take 2 more and then I'll ask the panel to respond. So I think we had one here. Actually, and there's one in the front as well.
I think my question goes to Sarah. Is one of the 4 corners you mentioned was one is data analytics. And you, I think, explained to us understanding and presenting that data in a very smart way is a key point or a need. But what I would like to ask is the use of that data and how does it relate to how data can either the analysis of it bring efficiencies or transformations in certain parts of the economy. So it's not only just the presentation or the smartness of how you present data, but the use of it and how do you see it apply in Africa.
Thank you. There's one in the front, I think, and then this gentleman afterwards.
Thank you. My name is Mike Onyman. I come from Uganda. I work with the National IT Authority in Uganda. When you talk about smart government, smart mobility, e-payment, and e-services, one of the most critical things that
education. In Africa and other continent is inclusive for all people, specifically for those illiterate, because still, I don't know in other country, in Ethiopia, more than 70% of our students at high school is not access for information technology yet. So do you think that in the near future, this digital service or smart government service is inclusive? So one of you can respond on it. So the second one is the panelist from Ethiopia. There is a big problem for online payment system operating, specifically for global payment. Now, of course, yes, our financial policy is so difficult to purchase even medicine from the global market by paying online for those international suppliers. What Ethiopian government is thinking to solve such a problem? Because finance should be, or payment system should be access for all people at all places and also at all levels. So this problem may not be only Ethiopian problem. My friend from Rwanda can respond on it. What African governments can think to solve such online global access problem or payment problem to create an access of material from the global market. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, again, I will try to answer, the online payment problem. As you know, this is from my view, we have a foreign exchange problem, and anything that has to be imported, there are regulations. Those has to be based on letter of credit and so on. But through payment systems, I think there was an attempt, by commercial bank to have a kind of visa, payment. But again, the foreign exchange problem was there, and I'm not quite sure, how it has really finalized. I have no information about that. But there are efforts, really, as our country progresses and as we accumulate foreign exchange, I think these issues will be history. That's what I really believe.
So let me answer the use of data question. I think the most important thing is we try to work with people to help them understand really what problem you're trying to solve, right? Rather than gathering a lot of data all the time, it's what is the question you are trying to answer, and then what do you do with it? So, for example, we work with tourism boards all over the world. Now, we know, remember, all of our data is anonymous. So you're a 16-digit number to me. I have no idea who you are. I will never know. We are only a business-to-business company. So your bank knows who you are, we don't know who you are. However, there are patterns that we can aggregate to show what's happening as people move around the world. We work with those digital payments to help people understand who's coming into a country, what they're spending on, because then what happens is you know when those people arrive, because you as a tourism authority, as a government, know when people arrive. You can then market to them to say, we know that people like to dine out a lot more, we need more restaurants, or we know that people like cultural tourism, so we can focus on that. And you can turn around and advertise those things that we know that people are interested in, right? And that's the key way that you connect and how you use the data. We work with a lot of merchants around the world to help them reach out to consumers that we know like their type of business, but maybe don't shop there. Right? So that's how you actually increase business. One of the big things to do, like a lot of times we'll go into a merchant and they'll say, these are my best customers. And we'll say, well, that's only half of your best customers, because half of them shop for the same thing away from you, right? So then they can sit and change their marketing campaign. So there's many ways to use the data, but the key thing to understand is that we are really creatures of habit. And so what you're trying to learn in data, whether it be medical, data, or it be in terms of payment data, in terms of, services or utility or transit, you're just trying to understand people's patterns. To say, we need more transit on this side of the city during these hours because this is when people are traveling more. So let's move more buses and light rail over here versus over here. We know more people are living in this neighborhood, so do we have basic services for them? So it's trying to understand those patterns that then you can action on. And that's the key thing. We think about it as know and then act. And that's very much how we think about data.
Great. So I'm going to ask the panel to think at the moment about the inclusivity question and the, what was the other one? The governance question, how to make tech do what it does. But now if I can ask, from the Rwandan example, there were questions about critical success factors, both for starting and then growing, and then how you looked at the security issues.
When we started, there is one important principle, I would say, or value, which is citizen centricity. When we launched the platform, we knew people were going to apply, but behind on the back-end system, government officers are not going to open, so to see who applied and provide service. But what we launched when the platform was ready, really the operationalization of it was the most important factor. And this included first launching a call center that has actual people who picks up the phone and respond. There are many call centers that had been there, but you would call, not get someone to pick up the phone. So I think that was our best product when we launched, because people actually started to call to ask, okay, I've applied, how am I going to get my service now? We would explain. And this really contributed to give some credibility to what we were going to build. Second was to somehow get the government officer incentivized to join. We chose some kind of a pilot districts and sector officers, not so many. We took them to a retreat, those of the service providers, we took them to a retreat, trained them, and in the end we offered them smartphone and 3 months of free internet bundles. Actually, we ended up extending that to 6 months of free internet bundles. So they had no more reason to say, I have no internet, or I wasn't able to process a citizen application. So these are small examples, but the idea was, when we started, we had to put a focus to make sure that everyone who uses the service actually gets responded to. But then we asked a question, many other players weren't joining in. I think when we launched, our first payment channel was actually Tigo. They were the fastest to come on board with us, so with Tigo Cash, for people to be able to pay through Tigo Cash. But then, because again of the whole operationalization, the brand is known, starts to get known, some people are starting to comment about it. A very good presence on all social media, responding to citizen questions. So this really triggered some kind of an interest around the product, and accelerated other players to come on board. So really operationalizing it, running it as a brand and launching it and being focused on the brand being credible and loved got us to even accelerate how people onboarded. So remaining was just some organic growth that went very quickly with all the payment providers coming to us and connecting, and government officers now making it a case to go on Irembo and process application, because we were starting also to rank them around how they provide those services. Now, as we now are at an average of 20,000 users a day, the biggest problem we have is how do we innovate quickly? Because it starts to no longer make sense for someone who has applied for a birth certificate 6 months ago to come, and it feels like they have to fill in almost the same information. It's like, this is digital, but yeah, how does it get to know me better, so to provide me a better service? So really the challenge, and where we think we will remain relevant as a product, is if we innovate quickly and people see better and smoother way to access into government service. Now this brings other challenges that were discussed in earlier stages on capability of people, on skills, and how we really constantly innovate and accelerate innovation. Now when it comes to security, when it comes to security standards, they are there, it's known, and if you are rigorous and implement everything by the rule and do things seriously, I think you get to have a technology that's secure, that has all the key performance indicators tracked, so to know that you are constantly secure. I mean, using the best solution providers, Oracle as a database, or basically implementing the best standards. So far we haven't had any major security incident. The problems really come from the users of the platform most of the time, and this is how do people know that it's important to withhold and maintain privacy of information that they process and treat? How do citizens know that you don't give your ID card to someone to go apply for a service on your behalf with an agent? So this is a major campaign that we have to do to inform people that their ID is theirs, their Irembo account is theirs, not to share them. We have increased security when it comes to government agents who use Irembo as a back-end system to process government paper by adding public infrastructure. So, but it's a lot of training and awareness driving, so for people not to breach privacy and security of others.
Someone want to take either inclusivity or governance?
Well, clearly, I think there's nothing more important than, frankly, making everyone feel inclusive. And I think in Ethiopia, you hit it correctly on illiteracy and the challenges here. But again, I think this is the key of understanding sort of that PPP world, that public to private partnership, because again, we know that those people trust someone, and so government must partner with those people that we are trusted sort of individuals in the rural communities, and that type of sort of trust, sort of partnership, then can go disseminate the information. That's, for example, why we decided that we never would sell to a consumer. We have business partners all over the world because they have the relationships with the consumer. And that's the key thing to think about, I think, when you're thinking about this inclusivity, is how do we identify everybody who knows everybody, right? Because that's one of the things we talk about, it takes a village. It really does, especially in digital. And I think that this is a critical thing. The other thing I'd like to add is on the safety and security thing. There is nothing more dangerous going on in the world right now than how everybody is trying to hack into your systems. Let's be very clear and frank about that one. And there's nothing more important than everyone continuing to invest. Now, the fascinating thing is it's actually not the big people, the big governments, the big businesses that are getting hacked. It's actually through the providers that we then hire that we're getting the attacks coming in. So the key thing that's very important for all of us to share our resources with each other is best practices on digital safety and security. And I think this is a really important thing. This is something that, you know, you really need to secure and warn against. Not to say you don't go digital, but just understand that, as we like to say at MasterCard, the fraudsters have a job to do every day just like we do, okay? And our job is to keep them out. And so we have to, their job is to try to get in. And so we're just trying to really focus on that. But the key is we know that it takes everybody participating on this, and this is one where we all can share.
Thank you. Does anyone on the panel want to take the question of how we make sure technology does what we want it to do?
So one of the things which I think I've noticed since being here is the different expectations or requirements which different actors across the Ethiopian government will be looking for within a particular area. So, you know, every African country has got this vision statement. Some of them, it's just a document which you have to produce because your neighbors have produced them. For others, it's an actual document which you will strive to target, and if you don't hit it, you will find out why you haven't hit it. I think a great example of a country, actually, who has taken their vision statement very, very, very seriously is Rwanda. It's meant to be a document which will turn into policy, which will turn into implementation. So when it comes to how do you make sure this piece of technology does what you want it to do? Well, I think you need to start by saying what you want to do with one coherent, codified voice. And that gives the private sector the space to come in and innovate with the confidence that the money which they invest will actually generate an ROI, that they won't spend this money and then find out 6 months later that there's actually a different government department which should be owning this area. On a very, very, very simple example of this, I would say, would be an ID card project. Let's say that a private tender was interested in providing a highly secured identity management system for the entirety of Ethiopia. Who would own that data? Who has the responsibility and the legal liability to make sure that this stuff is secure all the way down the chain? So when it comes to these big picture projects, I think that, yeah, government putting together a coherent vision is really the crucial part of it.
Thanks. So I'd like to ask the panel now just to give a 1 to 2 minute wrapping up, final thoughts, and maybe just talk a little bit about what they think comes next. In particular, if we were sitting here in a year's time, what would we expect to be able to look back on having happened? Maybe we go the opposite way to the intro.
Sure, my summary thoughts. Okay, sure. I mean, my basically core thesis is about Ethiopia and digital technology and e-government is that the signs are incredibly positive. Government has made this a real priority. All of the talking is there, the right conversations are happening. So the question we really have to ask ourselves is, how do we create the right structure for government and private tenders and private companies to be able to specify clearly the objectives of a piece of technology, tender it fairly, and then actually implement it with KPIs which must be followed, which must be hit, and if they're missed, will bar a private actor from working with the government again. For me, this is the correct framework to operate in, but it's not really for me to say. I think that a unified and codified government vision for what its objectives are over the next maybe 5 years, and which pieces of technology or which within the ecosystem.
What I would say is that it's extremely important for government to implement, and someone has asked what we would give as advice to other African governments. Implementing e-government projects in an inclusive manner, public-private partnership, in my opinion, drives or is a big driver of the digital economy as a whole. Because the more government shows leadership and boldness in completely transforming itself, the more it drives citizens to want to be digitally literate. It drives businesses to try to do more around digital. It drives the need for a pool of software engineers and developers who actually get job at coding after they complete their training instead of doing other things. So it's extremely important for governments to go as fast as possible. The best thing is there is no government or e-government project that will look the same from a country to another. It's really innovative. It needs to apply to the size of the country. You talked about it, to the way people interact with things in general, because that's the way they would want to interact with technology. So to me, it's extremely important for governments to adopt this, and they don't need to think of it as a huge investment. It's something that can start small and grow very quickly depending on the demand.
I think if I was to think about where we would be in a year, I would hope that we would feel that we really had included more people. And in the sense that more people were aware of what was being offered, of their ability to be more included within society, of their ability to pay their payments easier, to receive remittances from outside easier, to run their businesses better, to take better care of their families, to do better with health. And I know it sounds all happy talk, but the reality is this is what I truly believe is the value of technology. The value of technology is it allows us to be connected and to learn and to learn faster. And the key is what do you do with the learnings? Do you take that information and use it for good? And I believe that we can, and I think this is the point where we know, yes, I somewhat disagree with Clément only on one thing, in the sense that, yes, I believe something has to be country specific, but I do believe there are commonalities amongst countries. But I also believe it's important that we have to also develop systems that will work with other countries, because we do live in a world with each other. So I do think that it is important that there is that communication, especially if you talk about sort of foreign payments going in and out in foreign currency. It's the importance of being able to connect and really watch and understand where that currency is moving. So I do believe that we can have a system that will advance, be inclusive, but definitely will incorporate a global solution as well.
In my opinion, citizens need to exploit, the value of technology, which means government has to bring, government services closer to the people, and of course, bring about good governance, utilizing, technology. That means implementing, government services, automating even the government business processes so that things are done, fast and so on. And also implement, all the e-procurement, e-health, e-agriculture, all kinds of things. And I have a very strong belief that citizens need to be informed utilizing, technology. And if we can achieve that, in the next 5 years, I would say we have done, we have reached, a major milestone. Thank you.
Thank you. So we talked about the importance of the smart governance. We talked about the impatience in actually getting these solutions out there, moving quickly, testing things, seeing how we can improve, how we can bring government closer to the people. We've talked about some learnings, both globally from Rwanda and other places, as well as the Ethiopian context. And we've talked about inclusivity. We talked about including people within Ethiopia. We've talked about including Ethiopia within a global system. Well, I think this was a really interesting, stimulating panel. Thank you all for joining us. And to close, I'd like to ask you to show your appreciation to our panelists. Thank you.